Hello everyone and welcome to week 1 of Introduction to Prehistoric Archaeology in Britain. My name is Ceri and I will be your mentor for the course. I'm really looking forward to exploring prehistoric Britain together. This lecture will introduce you to the overall course, the content which we'll cover, methods of assessment, and finally we'll embark on our prehistoric journey starting with the Paleolithic in Britain. This course will run over 6 weeks. The first week will cover Paleolithic Britain, focusing on the earliest occupation of Britain by species of hominin. The second week will examine Mesolithic Britain and the development of sedentism as a precursor to farming. The third lecture will continue this theme of sedentism and agriculture with a focus on monument building during the Neolithic. You may be familiar with famous Neolithic monuments such as Stonehenge and Ivory stone circle. The fourth week we will focus on the Chalcolithic, which is early Bronze Age Britain, and the arrival of the beaker culture in Britain. The fifth week we will examine the mid to late Bronze Age and the development of new technologies. Finally, the sixth week will focus on Iron Age in Britain, ending with the Roman occupation of Britain in 43 AD. We will be examining a range of themes including evolution, changing technological and ritual practices, alongside the development of different settlement patterns and types. This is particularly significant during the Mesolithic and Neolithic periods, as these represent the transition from more migratory hunter-gatherer communities to sedentary farming communities. Finally, this course is focusing on Britain. Other case studies may be mentioned, but the focus is predominantly on the occupation of Britain during the prehistoric era, so please bear this in mind when thinking about the timelines and dates of different periods, as these will differ depending on worldwide region. So each week new material will be uploaded to Google Classroom at 9 AM Greenwich Mean Time. This includes lectures, discussion questions, quizzes and additional study resources, which are all outlined below. In terms of discussion questions, these are statements or questions for debate which will be uploaded to the corresponding week's material on Google Classroom. For example, one of the discussion questions for week 1 is, how different were the Neanderthals from us, Homo Sapiens? This question requires you to draw out 3 main similarities and differences between Neanderthals and Homo Sapiens and to discuss these in the comment space below with your course mates. You are expected to respond to 1 discussion question per week of your choice. Some weeks there may be only 1 discussion question, whilst other weeks there may be up to 3. These questions are not assessed, but are an important resource to use in order to interact with your course mates and explore different themes from the lectures and additional study material. In terms of the assessment, there are weekly quizzes released with the lectures and further study material each week. These are the only assessments for the course, and in order to pass the course and obtain the certificate, you must have a 60% pass rate for the questions overall. The points from all the combined assessments will add up to 100. So in order to pass the course, you must achieve 60 points overall. There will be continuous grading of assessments with grades and feedback released during the course and up to the 17th of March. Further study resources will also be uploaded weekly and will range from academic journal articles and website pages to external site-specific lectures and programs on case studies. Some key further study material will also be included as links at the end of each lecture. In the final week of the course, there will be the option to complete 1 of 2 short essay questions. These will not count towards your final grade for the course, but you will have the option to have these assessed and to have feedback provided. If you have any questions about any of the course material, structure or methods of assessment, please get in touch. My email address is included on the course information page uploaded in week 0. So now, let's begin by exploring the Paleolithic, which is the theme of this week's lecture. The Paleolithic is the longest period of prehistory which we will cover during this course. It is split up into 3 periods: the Lower Paleolithic, which began just over 3 million years ago, the Middle Paleolithic, which spanned around 300,000 to 30,000 years ago, and the Upper Paleolithic, which began around 30,000 years before the present day and ended around 11,000 or 12,000 years ago. The sites we will discuss in this lecture span the end of the Lower Paleolithic, between 900,000 or 800,000 years before present, up to around 11,000 years ago during the Upper Paleolithic. We will start by discussing the earliest evidence for humans in Britain by examining the archaeology at the site of Happisburgh in Norfolk. This will be followed by an examination of evidence for Homo Heidelbergensis at Boxgrove in West Sussex and Homo Neanderthalensis, better known as Neanderthals, at the site of Swanscombe. Finally, the lecture will conclude by exploring early evidence for Homo sapiens or anatomically modern humans, and we will examine the site of Paviland at the Gower Peninsula in Wales. The first early form of human which we will examine is Homo Antecessor. This species lived between 1.2 million years up to around 800,000 years before the present day. The image to the left displays a reconstruction of Homo Antecessor's skull, whilst the image on the right displays a facial reconstruction of what Homo Antecessor may have looked like in life. Archaeological evidence of their presence in Britain is found at two sites, Happisburgh and Pakefield. The evidence from Happisburgh encompasses stone tools and a set of footprints representing a family group. Homo Antecessor was initially discovered in Spain, so this discovery suggests that different groups and communities may have migrated far from their origin. You can learn more about the footprints at Happisburgh through some of the additional study resources attached to the material for Week 1 in Google Classroom. Pakefield is a slightly more controversial site due to its relatively late date and absence of any remains or impressions of its inhabitants, for example footprints. Pakefield has produced some evidence for stone tools. This site dates from around 700,000 years ago, which has led to suggestions that a species of early human, possibly Antecessor or a species between Antecessor and Homo Heidelbergensis, may have lived at the site. It is striking that the evidence suggests Happisburgh may have had a considerably colder climate than Pakefield, suggesting that the species which lived at both sites may have been adapted for quite different climatic conditions. The next species which we will look at is Homo Heidelbergensis. This species lived between 700,000 to 200,000 years ago. Its remains are found at Boxgrove in West Sussex. These remains include a single leg bone, or a tibia, and 2 teeth. Its physical characteristics include a heavy brow ridge and a large cranial capacity. This species was also relatively tall, with males averaging 5 foot 9 inches and females averaging 5 foot 2 inches. There is extensive debate over the ability of Homo heidelbergensis to hunt. This is particularly notable at Boxgrove, where archaeological evidence may have represented animals killed through hunting or animals which were scavenged by groups of people. However, Boxgrove represents the first potential evidence of projectiles being used in Britain. One horse scapula from the site displays evidence of puncturing by a projectile point, suggesting a spear may have been thrown at the animal, wounding it and causing potential fatal injury. This implies that hunting practices were present in the communities of Homo Heidelbergensis. We will now explore the archaeological evidence for the Neanderthals. These are some of the closest relatives to anatomically modern humans. Neanderthals lived between 400,000 years before the present day and to around 40,000 years before the present day, after which they appear to have died out. One of the sites their remains are thought to have been found in prehistoric Britain is Swanscombe. This is a site located in Kent which contained the skull of an adult female, strongly thought to be that of a Neanderthal. Notable physical features of Neanderthals include strong, prominent brow ridges, a large nasal cavity, a barrel-shaped chest and ribcage, and a relatively short height, ranging from around 5 foot to around 5 foot 7 inches. Despite the typical image of Neanderthals as having rather low intelligence, they had a relatively large brain size, ranging from between 1,200 cubic centimeters to around 1,750 cubic centimeters. We also share some of our own DNA with the Neanderthals. Genetic analysis has revealed the presence of Neanderthal interbreeding with early anatomically modern humans, leading to the inclusion of Neanderthal DNA within the human genome. So moving on to Homo sapiens, this species has lived between 300,000 years before the present up to the present day. Unlike the previous species of hominin which we have discussed, which were descendants of one another, Homo sapiens existed at the same time as the Neanderthals. This section will compare the archaeological evidence in order to identify the key differences between the species and how these differences helped Homo sapiens to outlive the Neanderthals as a species. In terms of their lifespan and livelihood, Homo sapiens generally had slower maturity compared to the Neanderthals, but generally lived for longer. Their physical features included less pronounced brow ridges and a smaller nasal cavity, which is suggested to be adaptations for warmer climates. They also had a slightly taller average height, which was around 5 foot 7 inches for males and 5 foot 3 inches for females. And the brain size was generally around 1,350 centimeters cubed, potentially smaller than the brain size of Neanderthals, which ranged up to 1,750 centimeters cubed. These physical adaptations helped Homo sapiens adapt to warmer climates, which may have been one of the reasons that Homo sapiens survived whilst Neanderthals died out. Other theories suggest that Homo sapiens may have killed the Neanderthals, whilst others link the changing climate with competition for resources, suggesting that the increased adaptability of Homo sapiens helped them to survive in these conditions. A particular case study I would like to focus on with this lecture is that of Paviland Cave in the Gower region of South Wales. This cave contained the oldest anatomically modern human burial in Britain, the Red Lady of Paviland. The Red Lady was discovered by William Buckland in 1823 and was originally thought to be the skeleton of a Roman witch due to the association of the burial with red ochre pigment. Later analysis of the skeleton revealed it to be that of a young adult male dating from between 29,000 to 33,000 years before the present day. The burial is associated with red ochre, which was spread across the skeletal remains. A number of theories have been suggested for its positioning across the body, including it potentially representing a dye from funeral clothing the individual may have worn during the burial ritual, or alternatively, the pigment could also have been spread across the body as a form of burial rite after death. Other artifacts found with the burial include ivory rods or wands, as described by Buckland, alongside shells and potentially a mammoth skull. However, whilst the mammoth skull was recorded by Buckland in drawings of the site, no skull has ever been recovered, so it is generally supposed to have been an imaginative interpretation rather than a representation of the skull's inclusion in the actual assemblage. I have particularly focused on this final case study as I believe it is an especially important example of something very recognisable and relatable to modern humans today. The significance of the funerary sphere and the ritual and beliefs associated with it are an important example of an expression of personhood and identity in the Paleolithic period. This lecture has briefly covered the early occupation of Britain. Initially, we have explored Homo Antecessor, an ancestor of modern humans. This species left traces in some form, including stone tools and footprints at the sites of Happisburgh and possibly also Pakefield. Next, we moved on to Homo Heidelbergensis, a more recent ancestor of modern humans. The key site for this species was Boxgrove, which was a hunting site where stone tools manufactured by Homo Heidelbergensis were discovered. Alongside these, human remains in the form of a tibia and 2 teeth were also revealed through archaeological excavation. We then examined the Neanderthals, with remains found at Swanscombe in the form of stone tools and human remains, including the Swanscombe skull. We also examined the physical features of Neanderthals and Homo sapiens in order to help us understand why one species survived whilst the other died out. Finally, we explored Homo sapiens and evidence for an early form of burial at the site of Paviland Cave in Wales. This concludes the lecture for week 1. The following slides are included to present the sources used to create this lecture. I have also attached several links to further study resources for you to use to explore topics from the lecture further. Next week we will move on to the Mesolithic period, focusing on the sites of Star Car and Avelin's Hole. Thank you for listening.